former athletes turned therapists. Our focus in these episodes is to humanize the athlete experience beyond the lines of their arena. In this podcast, we will explore the whole athlete, highlighting the mental, emotional, and social aspects of their journey.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Athlete Wellness Podcast here at Millennium Counseling Center. It's Lilly Lehman, and we are going to be joined by one of our new interns, Lyda Robinson. And then we are going to have a candid conversation about the recruitment process to play sports at the next level after high school, and a little bit about what we wish we may have known during that process. And then again, other tips and tricks and things that we sort of gained along the way. So Lyda, if you want to give a little intro.
Well, thank you, Lilly. I'm excited to be on here and excited to be a part of Millennium. So yes, you guys, my name's Lyda. I went to St. Xavier University for 5 years. I did take my COVID year, my 5th year, so I got to get an extra year of eligibility, which was awesome. I had an up and down experience there, so it was interesting. You guys will see as we continue on with the podcast about my experience with recruiting at St. Xavier, my story with how I committed there, and just things I kind of wish I knew along the way. But yeah, I'm just really excited to be a part of this, and thank you for the introduction.
Oh, yes, of course. Remind everyone what you are currently studying and where you are studying right now and how Millennium sort of fits into that.
Sure. So I'm at North Park University. It's on the north side of Chicago. I'm getting my master's in clinical mental health counseling, and I'm currently in my 2nd year of the program, so I will graduate next August in 2025.
Yes, awesome. So exciting. Millennium is definitely happy to have you. Yeah, so you obviously played at the college level, softball, right? I guess tell us a little bit about what that recruitment process looked like for you. Was it always a goal for you to play at the college level? Sort of just like take us back.
Yeah, so I've been playing softball since I was 8 years old. I played other sports too when I was growing up, basketball, volleyball, softball, track, all of that. But that was my love. I loved it so much. My mom and my other coaches at the time, they knew at a young age that I was kind of above the curve of talent level too. So they knew that to throw me into travel ball and to kind of get that process going young. And then as I continued on, I got to play at more elite levels. And through recruiting, I feel like I was very young in the recruiting process. I think that was kind of the gap too, whether or not people could commit at young ages, whether they were allowing it still through like the NCAA. So there were some girls that were even recruiting getting like committing very young.
Mm-hmm. I feel like that's a trend right now with some sports as well too. I know some lacrosse players that I like hear about just through like growing up, or like my little cousins. I'm like, oh, you're in what grade? And you're thinking about going where, when, and you're like actually having serious conversations. Some people literally 8th grade, like for lacrosse and travel lacrosse, which is crazy. Basketball was completely different. It's like, I mean, you're obviously going to the tournaments and you're going to all those like showcases and trying to get your name out there and all that. But most people don't really, maybe like a verbal commitment when you're like maybe a sophomore or a junior, but most people kind of commit.
Yeah.
You're like junior, senior, high school season.
No, definitely. And for me, my experience recruiting was very different. Some people go to many schools, like Lilly, she had kind of debriefed me a little bit about her recruiting process. And she had older family members that already went through all of it. So she kind of had a different experience than me. So if you want to talk about that a little bit, and then I'll kind of touch on mine too.
Yeah, I think that's also what's awesome about having us both on right now is showing that there's a lot of different ways that you can go about it. And maybe like some that may resonate with some people, some that may resonate with others. And then honestly, for our audience to sort of just listen and be like, what would be most beneficial for them as well. And sort of taking a little bit of what we did or what maybe we didn't do and incorporating that into their own process. But yeah, so I played basketball forever, basically. I did play other sports, but again, it was always kind of basketball. And through travel, like showcase tournaments, I think I was like, I'll play if the opportunity sort of presents itself. Like, obviously, I love the sport. And if I didn't play at a high, like Division I level, I definitely saw myself playing like club when I was in college or whatever. But so I was sort of just waiting to see like interest first before I kind of like, then once I was able to like grasp interest in what you get your like first recruitment, like email or someone calls you or all that kind of stuff. And then that puts a little bit like pep in your step and you're like, oh, maybe this is something that I do want to try to like achieve. And this is kind of becoming a part of my dream that I didn't necessarily know what that was going to look like. So once that all started to sort of happen, I definitely wanted to play basketball, but I also wanted to value my education. And the degree aspect of going to play at the next level. So I definitely, through that sort of when I was like, my dad was like, and he was really big on this, Dad, if you're listening, here's your shout out, to visit as many schools as possible. And then imagine yourself like, okay, if you were not playing this sport, like if you tear your ACL tomorrow and you can't play and you're out for a season and kind of basketball goes to shit essentially, and you like, would you still want to be a student here? Which I think was a thing that kind of guided me through the recruitment process and definitely like the visiting process and all those like unofficial visits and official visits and that whole thing. But yeah, so that was a huge thing. And also like talking to people that don't play sports, talking to like, I don't know if you called like NARPs. Yeah, non-athletic regular people, like talking to a NARP or like reaching out to someone that's graduated. What was their favorite thing about, like, again, like reaching out to your communities, I think is great too. But ultimately, yeah, I think I probably visited like on like unofficial or official visits, like 10 schools, but then like outside of that, like on my own to just sort of like gather what I wanted. And honestly, some schools completely unrelated to basketball or playing at the next level, probably like 20 campuses. So yeah. And then even when we were on tournaments and we were near a campus, if it was like, even if it was somewhere that I had no idea where I wanted to go, like it was not aligning with anything that I wanted to do, my family was really big on like, well, let's just go to the campus because you never know. And like, let's see how that one may feel from one that is high on your list and one that's not even on your list. Like you'll have no idea. Honestly, the first time I visited Georgetown was before I had any conversation with any of the coach. And we were playing at a showcase in DC. It's actually when the Georgetown coach saw me, but I had no idea that he was going to be there. But prior to that tournament, we got there a day earlier. My mom was like, let's just go check out Georgetown. Like your aunt went there. Like, let's go check it out. And I was like, oh my gosh, I could totally see myself here, whatever. Totally would have never gone like and saw that school if my mom wasn't like, let's just do it if you're free time. You have a few hours off between games.
One more school of the 20 schools.
Exactly. And then there we go. And then at that point, I was like, oh my gosh, they reached out. Like now I'm excited. And then that was a mutual thing. I think I'm talking so much right now, but the big part of the recruitment process as well is reminding yourself like, okay, they're showing interest in me, but like, it's like that mutual, like, do I want to go there too? And remembering that. But that's sort of my quick rundown of how it went. I know yours was a little bit different if you want to dive into that.
Yeah, so mine was very, very different. I didn't visit 20 schools. I didn't visit 10. I didn't even visit 5. I visited one singular school. I think maybe 2 in total. My experience is I played softball with a couple of friends who one of the friends was actually there playing at St. Xavier for a year. And then the coach started showing interest and she came to a couple games and I made my appointment to tour the school and tour the campus and I really liked it. And that day I went St. Xavier's on the south side of Chicago. So we went to this little coffee shop with my mom. Like it was just me and my mom on the visit. And I called the coach right away and I was like, hey, like I really want to go here. So I kind of committed on the spot. Then obviously the paperwork and everything came down the road. And one of my good friends, she also committed there a little while later. So we were able to be roommates for like 3 years, I think it was. But yeah, so my experience was definitely way different than Lily's, but that's just kind of part of it. That's natural. I think too, depending on where you want to go distance wise, that's an important factor for me. My mom was having some health issues at the time. And so I really wanted to stay closer to home. So it was only like an hour and a half commute for me. So those are also things to think about in the recruiting process is like distance is if you're not a homebody and you want to travel the country, travel the world, go to different places and it's within your means afford to do that. Go on the visits that you feel like will fit wherever you want to go, whether distance isn't a problem. But if you're a homebody like me and you like to go home, you have family, I have little sisters, I have little brothers, like I like to see my family often. I think that's another thing to kind of take into account in the recruiting process is whether or not distance will come into play. But yeah, that's pretty much my story of like my committing. I literally committed the same day. I visited, I think, one school. Now that I think about it, I did like a little tryout and I was far away. It was in Missouri. I was like, I don't want to go here. And my experience at St. Xavier was really good for the most part. But yeah, that was pretty much kind of what I did. I committed that day. I was like, sign me up.
What things do you think, what things that were like maybe led you to that initial like, okay, I'm in, like I'm locked in decision? And then I guess looking back now a few years out of it, what are some things that you maybe wish you gave a little bit more thought or sort of walk me through that?
Yeah, I think For me, I was 18 when I visited, I think 17. So I was still young and naive, and I'm still young. But at the time, you just don't really think about these other factors that come into play. I really enjoyed the girls were nice. They were welcoming. The campus was beautiful. I mean, St. Xavier is a really pretty campus. The gymnasium was really cool. They were talking about in the works of revamping the weight room, which they did, and it's actually really beautiful in there now too. The field was pretty. It was close to the dorms. It was easy walking accessibility to the practices and stuff. So that's what kind of drew me in. The coaches were nice and welcoming. And the assistant coach at the time, she kind of really drew me in, and she left before I even went on campus to play. So that was the tough part of it. But yeah, I think it was just like that welcoming family that I felt at the time was really important to me. And my coach, she really did understand the situation with my mom too throughout the 4 year 5 years I was there, which I really appreciated too. But yeah, I think looking back now, I wish I would have done a few things differently. I think I would have talked to a lot more alumni of what their experiences were with this coach and the previous coach that retired before then. And just kind of shadowing practices, I think going and seeing games like football, whether football, baseball, basketball, whatever it was, like going to different events and just seeing the vibe of it, seeing if that's something that seems like a good fit for you. Do the players on the team go to those games? Stuff like that I think is really important, because for me personally, I'm a big like family aspect of like doing things together, whether that's going to dinners together as a team, whether it's going to games, supporting other teams. And I did see that through my experience at St. Xavier. Everybody supported each other at different sporting events and activities like that. So there's a lot of factors that I think I wish I would have looked on for other facilities too. Like St. Xavier had good facilities for what they had, but going to other schools, like my final like national tournament we played in my super senior year, we went to Oregon Tech. And I mean, it was just unreal, like the facilities they had, like Indiana Wesleyan, like all of them, like they have unreal, unmatched facilities. So, that's a big thing that comes into play too for athletes of whether or not you want to be at a facility that has really good amenities. Like, what do they provide? I think those are some questions to kind of think about too, that I wish I would have thought about or knew, or someone would have told me like, hey, like, what are some other things that come to mind for you about where you want to be? But when it came down to it, it was more of like the family aspects of like, what if they were welcoming or not? And they were. So, yeah.
No, I love that. A few things are sort of sticking out that I want to comment on. One, I think it's so silly that you mentioned like, how close is your practice field from your dorm? College athletes know that's a lot. If it means that you can get a few extra minutes of sleep, or it's going to be easier to run to the calf and grab a banana before practice or XYZ, like those types of things. Like if you are like looking at a lot of different options, like those, and like there's really not much else.
Right.
That's really going to be a driving factor. Like those types of things are important. Also, like the training staff, like are you getting along with the strength and conditioning? Like you spend a lot of time with these people, and it's not always just the coach. Another thing that's popping up is like, so like injury, physical rehab, mental health, which is like a huge thing why we're all here.
Yes.
Do they offer mental health support? Is there like an in-house counselor? Do they refer out? Does everyone talk to the same person? Maybe you want some like pull away and be kind of like removed from the school and removed from the team, and you want that confidentiality. Maybe you want something elsewhere. So like those are other things that just to think of. So I guess my advice for people out there would to be, before you visit any school, or maybe after each and every visit, you can maybe add a new like question or like a takeaway or whatever, is that like have a kind of list of things that you're jotting. Because when you're there, it's really, really, really easy to be like, to fall into
to get
it.
caught up in it. Yeah. Because they're trying to sell you, they're like, you have all these great things and all these, depending on where you go, whether it's D1, D2, D3, the funding, like they can offer some really cool stuff. But if you can't see what the dynamic is with the coaching, with the players and with the teammates, like you don't know what you're kind of expecting, because everybody's trying to sell you. And so actually my fiance also went to St. Xavier. And this is kind of a good point to bring up too, is he visited schools. And one of the schools he went to, he noticed as he was being taken on the tours with the head coach for the football team, he noticed that none of the players were saying hi to the coaches. None of the players were like, what's up? Like, how are you guys? It was
Dare I say red flag, beige flag? I don't know.
He noticed that. And that's something that he that was one of his top schools at the time. And he's glad he went on the visit to see like that dynamic wasn't working. And he ended up going to St. Xavier, and that's where we met. So there's just things to really think about. Like really, what Lily was saying, take notes before, like what are some things that you really want to utilize And if you don't care about the dynamics of the team and you want to be on the best team possible and you want to be at the best facility possible, like put those things down, like see if that fits your niche of what you like and go for it.
Yeah, I think it's also, so I guess like now we're kind of pre even starting the recruitment process. It's going back and like looking at yourself and asking yourself some questions like, what are my values? What are my like non-negotiables? What am I willing to compromise on? What do I know I need that will like help me get through this? Because I mean, it's like a lot. There's a lot of stuff going on. It's a lot of time. You maybe are away from home, or maybe you're going from being the best player in the state to like riding the bench your freshman year in college, or who knows what could happen with injury. And maybe there it goes and things are pulled out from under you. Or yeah, even like I think I would kind of add on to what my dad said with me originally. Like if I got injured the next day and basketball was taken away, would I like this school? I think there's also another thing of like, if my coach got fired or if my coach retired, like that coaching staff and like all of that as well is another thing. Obviously, like with coaches, I would say like it's important to be flexible and give everyone like a fair shot and like a good chance and all that kind of stuff. But like, and I do think, like you said, like family, check the vibe. Like, are these personalities getting along with one another? But it's also recognizing that that maybe shouldn't be the end all be all sole thing, at least around coaches. I think you hear a lot of stories of the person who recruited me, they left, like, and then I looked to transfer and all that kind of stuff. So I would just urge people to, I don't know, I think it's like there's a happy medium. There can be like a few things that you prioritize, and maybe if something's lacking here, the other thing picks up there, and it's just like, whatever, like put all your eggs in one basket type thing. Like yeah.
For sure. And remembering too, like not every place is going to be perfect and fit all of your needs, but prioritizing what is important to you, I think should be written down of like, what do I want? What do I expect? And what can I work with too within a program? Because you might find places that don't have the best facilities, but they have the best program that you've seen, and you can work around that. Or they might have the best facilities ever, but the worst programs you've seen, and that's still where you want to go. I think just in the distance too, like if it's a place that fits your means for that too, I think there's a lot of things to think about and it can get overwhelming. So I think especially just utilizing the importance of talking with your family members and parents too, and other athletes that have gone through the process, just kind of confiding in them just to get their input, I think is really important in the recruiting process.
Totally. I think that's sort of how we ended up wanting to talk about this too, and bringing it to the podcast, is recognizing that like a therapist that specializes in working with athletes and mental health. And here at Millennium, it's also oftentimes athletes turned therapists. So we've gone from being an athlete and at one point being in this whole process to now going to school, learning a little bit more about like all the mental health aspects of it. I think that's just kind of another reason, is again, like that support and recognizing that it may kind of feel like overwhelming and all encompassing, but sometimes you're allowed to be like, whoa, this is a lot. I'm overwhelmed. I'm afraid I'm going to make the wrong decision. I'm afraid I'm going to choose somewhere and then I'm going to want to transfer, or maybe I want to take that risk, but I don't know. Or what am I willing to compromise? And what are my values? Like, I don't actually know. And I think a conversation, again, with like an athlete and like a family member or whatever, but I do think that another area where people can gain maybe like a different type of support, maybe coming from like, and they don't know you as well, but they're in the process with you. And it's kind of that like therapeutic relationship, I think can be another area where, and it doesn't mean like, oh, I'm walking in, I'm going to ask my therapist exactly where I should go and like give advice. Like that's not what we're here for. But I think we are here to create a space where you can kind of lay everything out on the table and there's no other factors. And it's kind of this person like outside of your life, but knows your life. And it's kind of that space that you feel comfortable and safe to process. And I think that's, again, like going to therapy as a whole, even outside of the recruitment process. I think the best way and the way that I love to explain like the therapeutic relationship or therapy in general is that like you have set a time outside of your busy life that you can press pause and you'll be like, okay, now I'm going to take all that's going on out there and I'm going to bring it in here and I'm just going to like sit with it and process it. And honestly, therapy for me, I think is like a lot of slowing down and just like giving yourself the time and the space and the compassion and the curiosity to even like, look, wait, like that happened. Why'd that happen? Or, whoa, I felt that way. Oh, I had no idea I even felt that way. And I think basically what I'm saying is I think that it can be a valuable tool in the process of recruiting as well.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think too, just remembering that the sports world is so fast paced. So just piggybacking on what Lily's saying too is just it's a crazy and fast world. And so just being able to ground yourself back in like therapeutic work, I think could be utilized, especially to going back into the field and going back on the court and utilizing these skills that you learn with a counselor or therapist is definitely beneficial. So I think that's kind of where we're getting at too of this podcast is like just knowing that there are people there that relate to you that in the professional field that can help you and guide you to make these decisions without, the outside opinions of everybody else coming into play. It's just you and the therapist and what your thoughts are and kind of closing out the rest of the world. So I think that that's kind of what honestly drew me into being an intern at Millennium because they did have this sports and wellness division that they integrate with the counseling center as a whole. And I think is super beneficial for those that struggle with the just kind of the outside noise in the world of sports and non-sport related stuff too.
Exactly. Yeah. To sort of close it off a little bit, I think Lyda pointed out to it as well. But like in my time here at Millennium and working with a lot of athletes, perfectionism is huge. Or another thing, I mean, there's a lot of common threads, of course, that I think were just built in athletes that have been playing a sport for a long time. But one thing that I could pull out that I think is kind of making sense with this conversation is that like need for immediate like relief or gratification. Oftentimes it's like, oh, if I put in the work, I will see a result. And I think for a lot of athletes, it's like, oh, it may suck, but if I wake up a little bit earlier, if I stay after practice and I shoot a few more shots, like I will see the improvement. Sure, it takes time, but oftentimes if you put in the work, you see the improvement. And I think so sometimes when you take that sort of like control aspect out of it, it can get super, super overwhelming. And I think the recruitment process sometimes can feel like you don't have control, but basically what I'm trying to say here is that you want to remind yourself that like you are asking yourself if you like the place too. And that's sort of the control that you have. And if you're in the position where you have choices or you have the opportunity to maybe say yes somewhere, but no the other way. I mean, obviously there's so many factors that come in like financials and just like where you're at with everything. But I think it's important to just kind of remind yourself of your autonomy and your control in such a fast-paced environment.
Yeah, it's definitely an investment in your physical and mental well-being, and you got to find the place that fits you best.
Yeah. So we would love to hear what you guys think about this podcast. If you want to talk more, feel free to reach out. You know all of our socials. They're all everywhere. But yeah, thanks for joining us, Lyda. It was great.
No, thanks for having me. I'm excited to continue on with this. So thank you.
Awesome. Okay, bye.
Bye.